Hey, hello there. In this video, we are going to discuss about local, block and function parameter scope. So let's get started. So let's first discuss about the local scope. Now, in the very first video of this module, we have seen a high level description about the local scope. So we have seen whenever we declare a variable inside a function, then that variable will get a local scope. Okay, so let's quickly see one small example. Let's say I have a main function, and in this main function I am declaring one variable, that is var1. Then this var1 is called as local variable and its scope is going to be a local scope. Okay, so whenever we declare a variable inside of a function, then the variable will have local scope. Let me just create one function. So let me write void foo. Okay, let me declare one variable over here. Let me write its name as var2. Let's initialize it to 20. Let me just print it over here. So let me write cout var2 endl. Okay, cool. So now in this code we have one more function and name of the function is foo. Now in this foo function I have declared one more variable, that is var2, and it is initialized to 20, and then I am printing its value. Now this var2 is a local variable of foo function. See, var1 is a local variable of main function. var2 is a local variable of foo function. Now whenever we say that any variable is a local variable, that means that variable is only visible to that particular function. That means whenever we declare var2 variable, this will be visible only to foo function. Okay, it will not be visible to main function. So that means if we write cout var2 over here, then this will be invalid, because var2 is a local variable of foo function. That means var2 is only accessible inside foo function, and because of that you cannot access it outside of the foo function, and here this location is falling outside of the foo function. So that's why you cannot access var2 over here. Okay, so it's quite simple. Local variable only limited to that particular function in which you are declaring it, and you cannot access it outside that function. So that basically means if you are naming a variable var1 in main function, you can use same name in another function, and this var1 and this var1 is going to be different because they are in two different scopes. Okay, it's quite easy. So see, in main we have var1, in foo also we have var1. We can use same variable name because they are in different scopes. Okay, but you cannot do something like this. You cannot do like float var1 is equal to 20.20. This is not allowed. Why this is not allowed? Because they are in same scope. So here in the same scope you are trying to create two variables with the same name. So now when you will write cout var1, then which var1 compiler will consider? First one or second one? So this is an issue, right? So that's why you cannot redeclare a variable with same name in same scope, but you can use the same name in different scopes. So here you can use var1 because it is a different scope. Similarly, you can use var1 outside of a function, because when you declare a variable outside of a function, then it is a different scope. This is a global scope, right? So let me just write it over here in comments. This is a global variable. This is local, right? And again, this is a local variable, right? See, we are using same name at three different places, and it is allowed by the compiler because they all are in different scopes. Okay, now let me tell you what is the block scope then. So now we have discussed about the local scope. Now let's quickly discuss about the block scope. Now what is the block scope? Or before discussing about a block scope, let's discuss about the block. What is the block? Block is nothing but our compound statement. So whenever you have group of statements, or whenever you write multiple statements enclosed in curly braces, then it is called as block, or we call it as a compound statement. So whenever you write a compound statement, it creates a new scope. Okay, whenever you write a compound statement, it creates a new scope, and whatever you declare inside that scope will have compound statement scope, or it will have block scope. So let's take one simple example. Let's say you have one if statement let's say its condition is if 1. Okay, right now we don't care about the condition. Now here we are giving this block, we are giving this compound statement, right? So if you declare some variable over here, let me name it as, let's say, var2, let's put value as 40, then this var2 will have scope which will be a block scope, because this declaration of variable of var2 is happening inside of this block. Okay, so that's why whenever you will declare something inside of a block, then it will have a block scope. That basically means, let's say, let's print this var2. So let me just write cout var2 over here. Now this var2 is accessible inside this block because this var2 has block scope, but you cannot access this var2 outside of this block, because again the reason is same, it is having block scope and the block scope will end at the end of the block, and that's why this statement is invalid, because even if this var2 is declared inside of a function, but it's not actually declared inside of a function because it is declared inside of a block in a function. And that's why whenever you declare anything inside of a block, then it will have different scope, and that is called as a block scope. All right, so whenever you declare variable inside of a block, then it will have block scope, and you cannot access a variable which is declared in a block outside of the block, because the block scope ends at the end of the block. Now let me just tell you one important thing about the scope. Always remember, whenever we talk about the local scope will end at the end of the function. Okay, so whenever we declare a variable, it will have access till the end of the function, and the access will end at the end of the function. So you cannot access that variable outside of the function. Similarly, in case of block scope, the scope will end at the end of the block. Now we know that when the scope will end, but when the scope will start, when it will actually start, right? So the scope of the variable will start at its declaration, or just after its declaration. Always remember, see, this var1 has local scope. This doesn't mean that it is accessible everywhere inside a function. Let me just give you an example. Let's say I am declaring var1 over here, then I am writing cout statement. Now here var1 is accessible, but can we write this cout statement over here? Can we write it over here? The answer is no, you cannot write it over here, because as I have said, the scope starts after the declaration and the scope ends at the end of the function. So here the declaration is happening over here, so the scope of var1 will start after the declaration. So from line number 17 till line number 25. So if we try to compile this code, let's see what happens. If we try to compile this code, let me write g++ 02 local.cpp. Okay, so here we are not getting any error for line number 14. Can you tell me the reason? What can be the reason why we are not getting the error? The reason is we have one variable declared in global scope. So now what is happening? Here compiler is trying to find whether there is a variable in local scope with name var1. No, it is not finding the variable with local variable var1 in local scope. So then it is getting the next variable, that is global scope variable, and that's why we are not getting error over here. But if we comment this line and then if we compile this code, then you will see that we will start getting this error. Okay, that var1 was not declared in this scope. And we actually have learned new concept. Whenever we will have two variables with same name, where the one variable is in local scope and another variable is in global scope, in that case the compiler will first give preference to the variable in local scope, and then the compiler will give preference to variable in global scope. I am just going to give you an example, but I hope you have now got this concept that the scope will start after the declaration of the variable and the scope will end at the end of the function. In case of a block scope, the scope will start after declaration of a variable and it will end at the end of the block. Okay, cool. Now let's see, let me just delete this function. Okay, and let me just delete these lines as well. So I hope you are clear with what is local scope and what is global scope. Okay, now we have one variable var1 in global scope. Let's declare one variable with same name in local scope. Okay, let me just change its value. Let me give its value as 20, and now let's see what we get as the output, because we have two variable with var1 name. One is in local scope, one is in global scope. Let's see what happens, right? So let's compile this code. Okay, the code has not got compiled. Okay, now it has got compiled. Let me just clear the terminal. Let's execute our executable. You can see that we are getting 20 as the output. Now what is happening? The compiler is first giving preference to the local variable, and then it is giving preference to the global variable. So if we don't have this local, then compiler will obviously take value of the global variable. But if we have a local variable with same name as the global variable, then compiler will take value from the local variable. So this is something which you have to keep in your mind. Local variables get preference as compared to the global variable. Now the another question that might raise in your mind, that if we have two variable with same name, one is in local and one is in global, then how we can access a global variable or a variable which is in global scope. So we are going to discuss this point or this question in a FAQ video of this module. All right, so just wait till that video. But right now I hope you have got the concepts related to what is local scope and what is a block scope. Now let me just quickly tell you one small concept, that there is one more type of scope that is called as function parameter scope, and the function parameter scope is very similar to your local scope. So let's quickly see that. Let's declare one function. Let me write int foo. Let's say it is taking one input, let's say var1, and let me just delete this var1 from here. Let me also delete it from here. All right, now let's call this function foo, and let me just pass, let's say, value as 10. Let me just move this cout statement over here. Okay, this is a very simple code. Now in this case we have one variable, that is var1, and this variable is nothing but function argument or function parameter, and this function parameter or this function argument will have a function parameter scope. Okay, quite easy. So whenever you will have any argument, it will have function parameter scope. The function parameter scope will start at the start of the function and it will end at the end of the function. So whenever you will have function parameter or function argument, it will be accessible throughout the function, or its scope will be from the start of the function till the end of the function. So that's why whenever you will have any function argument, you can access it from the beginning to the end of the function. It's quite easy, right? Now let's see, can we declare a local variable with same name? So now what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to create a same variable with same name. Okay, and let me just assign some different value to it. So let me assign 20. Okay, let's quickly compile this code. Let's see if the compiler allows it. So now you can see we are getting an error, that is declaration of int var1 shadow the parameter. So that means it is not allowed, right? What is happening? We have one variable with name var1, which is a function parameter, and then we are trying to declare same variable with same name in a local scope, and it is not allowed. Your function parameter scope is very similar to your local scope. Okay, so you are not allowed to declare a same variable or variable with same name which you have earlier in your function parameter. All right, so this was about local scope, block scope, and function parameter scope. So I hope you are very clear with these concepts, and see you in the next video.